gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
That. Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy. Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Vasan, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we have a special episode. We're talking about Intangible AI with the help of our special guests, Intangible co-founders, Bharat and Charles. Charles, how are you?
Well, Ian, thank you. How are you doing?
I am thrilled, super excited to be chatting about content and AI today. And Bharat, how are you?
Good, thanks, Ian. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you both on the show. So obviously, every single person in the entire content world has been thinking about AI a lot over the past 12 months or more. And y'all are doing something really, really cool. You have interesting background, both from the creative side and also from sort of like the business side and investing and all that. So we're going to dig into all that. But starting off, Charles, like go in the Wayback Machine. What was a piece of content that really, excited and energized you and inspired you, back from early days, whether your childhood or otherwise?
So there's a very specific game that actually catalyzed my experience as a designer and ultimately what Bharat and I are doing here with Intangible. And that game was called Racing Destruction Set or Kit, and it was from Electronic Arts, and it was a Commodore 64. And what was fantastic about it is like many males, I like cars. And I loved driving those cars around and racing. And it also had a demolition derby mode, which is super fun, but it had a build mode. And it was the first game to have a build mode. And it allowed you to make your own game and invite and share that with your friends. And I thought, how amazing. So that more than I think any other early experience sort of shaped me. But yeah, as I got older, obviously there were different influences.
When we were creating the design for Remarkable for our podcast cover, I have a really fun design that was going to be the Commodore 64. It looked like that, but it's going to be Remarkable. I'll have to dig it out of the wherever the annals of history here at Caspian and
miss Commodore. I do.
Because, I did all these CIO, this is a tangent, but I did all these CIO podcasts. I still do on our show, CIO Classified. And so many technologists talk about the Commodore as like a pillar of their, of what inspired them to be in technology.
They were an amazing company. Yeah, they really were.
What about you? What piece of content inspires you?
Well, I don't think I've told the story before. Maybe Charles even doesn't know this, but I grew up in India and I was a quintessential child of American pop culture. And all of the English I learned, and I'm not kidding, I was the original LLM. Like I learned from watching A-Team, Knight Rider, Disney shows, Archie comics, you name it. Just every piece of American pop culture that I could get my hands on and video games is basically what I spent my entire teenage years doing. And so for me, it was all of that. It's kind of how I learned English. It's kind of how I, came to the United States, because it's all the stuff that inspired me around, man, I don't want to be an engineer or a doctor or something. I just want to do something cool. I'm going to go to America and make that happen. So it was a very coming to America thing for me.
Who couldn't be inspired by Knight Rider? That's what I want to know. Yeah. If Kid pulled up today in my front yard, I think I'd have a heart attack. Okay, so flash forward to today. Y'all co-founded Intangible.ai. Charles, tell us about Intangible.
So Intangible's trying to bring some joy into the creative process, and it's trying to apply AI in a different way to spark that joy. What do I mean by that? I've been working in this entertainment media space for a very long time, pre-millennial. And it's always suffered from the same set of barriers to entry where you need to know a lot of programming or math or computer graphics to kind of get engaged. And what I saw were a number of people who would have to learn how to be technicians of a tool before they could do the thing they already knew how to do, just to tell a story and to design that story in a way that would engage with an audience. So for 30 years now, I thought that there was a better way. And then when we found ourselves in this moment around generative AI, I knew that the time had come. Like we could apply generative AI in a way that was designed for creatives to do their best work ever. And I'm an ardent believer that creativity is team sport. So if you look at anything that we love that's iconic in the world as a film or a game, piece of architecture, invariably it's the product of many different people with specialized roles all coming together around a common understanding of what great's going to look like for the context. And so we built Intangible to take advantage of this moment to apply generative AI that's going to help creative teams do their work stronger, better, faster than they ever have before. And we're 100% focused on the creative process around those teams.
Yeah, and obviously in my creative work, whether it's writing or creating shows or everything in between, the last thing I want to hear is, "Hey, Ian, you got to learn this tool." And I understand, obviously, there's so many amazing tools out there and have been for a long time, but that's not what sort of a creative wants. Is like, you want to, part of the process, for sculpting David, I'm sure, was finding the right chisels, without a doubt. But that's not the fun part for most people. It's about, creating your vision and crafting that meticulously. And do y'all think that Intangible sort of helps creators do that?
It's definitely the goal. The idea is that we want to keep you in a highly creative, fluid state for you not to have to turn the corner and become deterministic about it. So most 3D systems and most actual content production systems require that you have the idea before you get there. And then you compile things, you create new content, and you put it into some formalized structure, and you make a bunch of editorial decisions, and then you get something at the opposite end. Our approach is a little bit different. We want it to be like putting thoughts to paper with a pencil, where it's very sketch-oriented. You can experiment at a very high level and build very sophisticated things, but you stay in that highly fluid creative state. And we want that for you, and we want that for your teams, so that you can forget about the tool and just focus 100% on the story you're trying to tell.
And Charles, you've worked at a bunch of places like Apple and Sony and places like that. Where did you come into this sort of problem in your own life in creating?
Pretty early on. My background was industrial design, and where I'm from in Canada, Canadian, there weren't a lot of actual roles for industrial designers in the graduated classes that I was a part of or had seen in the previous years. So I took my knowledge of 3D tools, which are requisite for an industrial designer, and 2D tools like the Adobe suite of products. And before you knew it, I became the person who understood user experience design before that was even a thing. And so I instantly got a lot of very interesting projects, one of which was actually doing production design. And so when I did production design for film and animation, I learned about tools like Softimage Creative Environment, which is a 3D animation tool. And my knowledge of the use of that tool turned into a job opportunity to go and design the next generation of that tool once the founder became aware of me. And that more or less set me on this career trajectory where for the last 30 years have been making tools to enable creative outcomes and influence.
And Bharat, what about you? Why are you so excited about this space?
Well, I told you about my childhood connection. So I generally like the film, games, media space, just because that's what I've always liked as a kid. And I got to spend 8 great years at a company called EA. This is almost 20 years ago, where I got to see people coming into the business just because it was fun, right? And the last, I would say 5, 6+ years have not been fun in the games business, the film business, the agency space. It's just a lot of dislocation. And what I loved about people joining EA was whether you worked at EA Sports, you were just there because it was fun. And so for me, a big part of, what AI brings, because there's a lot of anxiety about, is AI going to take over jobs? What is it going to do to the creative industry? I see it slightly differently. I see it as a way to revert back to the original joy if you come out of school or you're inspired as a kid and you want to build something cool. And what you have today is tools that are too complex. you've got this kind of assembly style, almost industrial factory way of making IP, whether that's working on stuff for Netflix or it's working on stuff at a big games company. And I think what would be better is if, there's a Twitter account trending right now, Levels.io. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's just this dude on the internet who's made a flight simulator on using Cursor. And he started coding it, I want to say like a week ago with no experience. That doesn't come from games. He was like, I'm just going to make a flight simulator. And maybe I can make it multiplayer. Maybe I can make it paid. And within a week, he's got this thing where there's like 200 people flying around in these simulators. Elon Musk tweeting about it just as a hobby. And games used to be like that. Film used to be that way. And what I love about, what AI is doing right now is maybe that it returns power back to creatives where you can just be creative. The AI does all of the tedious stuff. And then you get to see, is this a good idea? People get to react to it and you get energy from that interaction. And the more tools revert back to that, I feel like, maybe that also rights the industry itself a little bit, where it's more innovative content. It's more small starts and more businesses saying, hey, listen, I've got a great idea. Like, how do I turn this into, a real business that pays the bills versus going to work in a really big shop?
The next component of that too is you look at the moment that we're in where there's a lot of pressure on the entertainment spaces right now, and you layer on the effects of generative AI, which are not fully understood. But I think what we've observed with very high frequency is people are very concerned about how that's going to impact their industry, their studios, and themselves as individual contributors. So one of the most important things that we're doing here too is providing an opposite example against the way that we see generative AI being used today, where we apply generative AI to be your companion in the process. And you are 100% in control of the story that you actually have in mind and can visualize with an AI assist that helps you get from zero to something you can understand, something your team can understand, something your client can understand in the fastest time possible with very high quality.
That's a great point, Charles. I think a lot of folks come into this business from a technology perspective. Here's something cool and it can replace a bunch of people. I think all of our team comes from people who've been in industry and had to build content. And so our perspective is, hey, there's all this latent human knowledge. How do we make something that actually brings that to the surface? Otherwise, you're just going to get a bunch of lookalike content. And maybe production does get easier over time, but how do you get truly great work out of the tools that are coming about?
Yeah, the final thought there is, I was just going to say the final thought there is we want to, those people who feel somewhat threatened by the technological advance, we want to re-weaponize them so that they have more tools and skills at their skills that they can employ in different ways to ensure that, bright creative minds are in charge of the content that we enjoy as lovers of the space and consumers of that content.
Yeah, can I say like one of the challenges that I've had with the discourse around AI has been sort of this people championing the phrase like democratize creativity and all that. And it's sort of like, I understand what you're saying, but also like creativity is literally democratized. You can tomorrow take your pen or your pencil or you could write it in an email. You could write a book tomorrow. Like nothing is stopping you. You can, go find a paintbrush. There's a million tools out there that you could, create certain things. So I think that piece of it is not really understating what I think you guys are sort of getting at here, which is that I'll use an analogy that building a house in 1900, you build the four walls or, build the foundation. I don't know how to build a house. Build the foundation, build the four walls, you build the roof, you make the closets a certain size, whatever. And you'd be like, oh, well, we're way better building a house 125 years later. And it's like, actually, it's more complex than ever to build a house. It's actually gotten harder to build a house in 2025 because you have all of these lighting and integrated systems and all these other things that need to happen. Yeah. And I kind of feel like a lot of what, to your point, like some of the content that has been made is so complex now that for the person who's, sitting there on their couch, obviously, there's always going to be, $100 million budget movies and things like that. And, massive stars and all those sort of things, or like, these crazy games that, take, years and years to produce. But like, I mean, you're seeing lead times of like 7 years to make a video game. that like from a business perspective, there's a massive demand for it. All the gamers want to play this game, and it takes 7 years to create. So anyways, like those are the sort of things that can help audiences get what they want faster and help creators, create the vision faster, because there's sort of been layers and layers of complexity sort of built in with like infinite tooling and all that sort of stuff. Unless, I don't know, I'll let you both speak to that. But that's just like in my limited understanding of this whole thing, how I'm seeing it.
I think that's super relevant. One of the things that people talk about in AI is what is AI enabling, like more broadly beyond just the media space. And there's this debate about if you have this super intelligent thing that can do anything you want, the thing that it enables is agency. And one reason we're so focused on the beginning of the creative process where the ideas are born and they kind of unfurl into these much bigger things is you want to enable more agency by more people. And you want that process to be easier for hard to build kinds of content, right? There's CapCut, there's TikTok, there's lots of easy ways to put out content. But if you're trying to do a Pixar movie or a documentary, or you're trying to make an interactive game, that's the stuff that feels harder. And it feels like AI can simplify some of that. I can give you a first draft, I can give you a second draft, and I can do it in real time. But the agency that people feel when they're able to do that in real time is really, really powerful. And they share that with other people. Other people give them feedback. And at least when I've built stuff, that's the stuff that gives me energy. I made something as a kid, with my little Lego bricks. I shared it with my friends. They go, that's really cool. They want to build it with me. That's the fun part about being in this business.
Yeah. And to your point there, we should probably dig into this, that Intangible is focused on, 3D creative. Why did you start there as a clear area where people would want support to create that type of stuff?
I think BV and I will have some good answers to this. Why don't I prove it by answering? The thing that I observed most recently at Unity, right? Where I took a good, long, hard look at the gaming market, at indie tier, AA tier, AAA tier, talked to simply everyone in the world, looked at complete product life cycles, and also did that within other creative industries, also at Unity, looking at film, how they apply game engines for virtual production, architecture, automotive, you name it, they were all using Unity. And what I quickly discovered is the people who are responsible for the core creative decision-making, well, they're not using Unity, and they never will. Because they don't have time to go and learn a super ultra sophisticated tool that was designed for programmers, by the way. And on top of it, you need to learn how to code. So they were really in need of a way to express in 3D environments and humans interacting within those environments for all of those purposes, for gaming, for film, for architectural, automotive, you name it, they all needed it. And you couple that with an observation that on any given day, about 10,000 people around the world download the Unity editor, but only 4% of them are retained later after say 60 days. That's an indication of a massive opportunity. And so we thought there's a there. Plus we had a lot of direct anecdotal proof points where people are saying, I need a tool that's going to help me express the thoughts around a great game mechanic, the thoughts around a great game environment, how the overall narrative arc for a mission is going to play out. And they don't have those tools today.
And at least for the spaces that we serve, right? Film, games, agency work, events, our thesis was simple, which is human beings naturally perceive environments in 3D. And at least in these fields, communicating in 3D is very powerful. If you're describing a set for a commercial shoot or you're doing, a live event of some sort. But creating anything in 3D is really, really hard. There are plenty of tools that'll do that in 2D. And we really took inspiration from, what a Figma had done, but probably even more so what a Canva had done. And when Canva came out, and people were like, who would really need this? There's already Photoshop. And, isn't this really just for specialists? And it turns out the market is much bigger. I think Charles provided that data point of there are millions of people downloading this editor and less than 10% actually stay on it. And so can you build a tool? And I think until AI arrived, there wasn't an easy way to do this. There wasn't a way to talk to a tool or, drag and drop and make it super intuitive to build this stuff in 3D. But now that AI has come along, we feel like that's the last unconquered thing. You can set up a 3D set. You can figure out how to film it before you spend $8 on production. And then people know what it looks like, feels like. When you're pitching that to a client, to a movie studio, they get a sense of what that's like as well. And so everyone gets more confidence on the creative project before going into production. And one of the things that's broken about the business is everyone has to place that bet in millions and millions of dollars without knowing what's going to come out of it at the end of the day. And often it might not even be a storyboard. It might just be a script or a blurb, and then you're just hoping and praying that someone's going to do something good with it. And you can get all of the 2D assets you want, right? You're prototyping in 3D, but you get everything you would get for a movie shoot. You get a 2D output of a film, but you're filming it in a 3D set. So you get all the camera controls, all of the stuff that you would need for professional content that you don't really get from today's AI tools, because you want to move the camera this way. It's hard to do that in some of these tools. But if you're doing it in 3D, it's intuitive. It's what you would do in real life.
I'm curious about a little bit more about the user experience. And can you share a little bit about what makes it intuitive?
Well, it all starts with, obviously, not going to be surprised to hear me say design thinking, and a set of key tenets that drive how we think about the technology and how it applies for the audience that we need to serve. First and foremost, it's not about my subjective opinions or Bharat's subjective opinions. It's 100% around the needs of the creative audience that we intend to serve, which is large and very varied. But one of the principles in the design is that the tool will be walk-up usable to a person with basic computing skills. In their very first session, without going through a tutorial process or an extensive tutorial process, be able to generate something against their own ideas. And so every choice that we make is very carefully considered to make sure that remains to be true. Now, we provide progressive complexity or sophistication, so you can get to greater degrees of control. But for any human that has a point of view, like a professional who's a marketer or a product person that needs to describe a retail experience, that they can walk up to the tool and actually do that in their first go round. They don't need to learn how to think about 3D, and they don't need to learn how to code. They will have the benefit of being able to lay that out very easily, and also having the other important part to the previous question that you had asked, Ian, is interactivity. That's why 3D. If things were purely visualization, we wouldn't necessarily need to start with 3D. But because we want to support contexts where you need to impose humans and behavior around humanity into those environments, that's why we chose 3D. So again, you can do very sophisticated things, but you do not have to be technically skillful to produce them.
And Meredith, what I'd add to that is also, when you go into Intangible today, you're going to be able to set up a set. So you're going to be able to use words to create a world. You're going to be able to move things around Lego style. So super intuitive type of, control system. You'll be able to press a button, get great visuals. But where this world is headed as well is you're going to be able to give things a script, right? Whether that's for your high school play or like a movie you're thinking about or something you've written, or you have an event that you're staging. It's going to be able to create that thing for you. It's going to be able to do the first cut of the cinematography. And you're just sitting there, and this is all happening in real time. And normally this would take weeks or months. It would take other people you need to coordinate with. But with no code, you can talk to the system, you can type stuff in, and it will just start to create the stuff. So skills I don't have necessarily. The tool is going to provide me because I know what my intent is and what good looks like and, what I want it to show. But I don't have to learn to be a videographer. I don't need to be a set designer. I don't need to learn to do any of these things. But to the degree I want to change a few things and move things around, that level of creative control I still have. And so a year or 2 years from now, you're going to see, the same thing you're seeing on the coding side of things, where AI writes a lot of the codes, but the creative intent comes from human beings.
100%. Something, thank you, BB, that spurs thinking on my side too. So in order to make that work, like generative AI is typically enabled via some natural language interfacing, right? And that modality tends to be prompt. And while we use prompt, hopefully very powerfully, for similar purposes where you can ask for a world, as BB described, and you get a world, that world is also a living thing because everything in the system is modeled after what things actually are and how they work in the world. We built our own representation of the world, which is a structured world model that we interface with foundational models to make sure that your creative intent gets met And from the point of you have an idea to its resolution so that you can evaluate it, or your stakeholder can evaluate it, or your client can evaluate it, we've removed all of the frictions in between so you can get as fast as possible to that visualization of the core idea. It's 100% around creative communication.
We wouldn't be in the films business if we didn't have some inspiration. So, that the analogy I use is, you guys have seen the Nolan movie, Inception?
Of course.
Yes.
And so you're walking down the street, you're able to get buildings to come up around you. You're going to get a sky bridge, you get cars walking around, you can do all of this stuff. And then that's a dream. You're dreaming it up and you're designing this thing. And so wouldn't it be cool if someday you're able to do the same thing without any coding expertise, none of that type of stuff? You're like, I want a building over here, I want cars up here, I want people walking over here. And you're doing all of this complexity just because, I don't know, you have a trade show booth, or, it's your kid's high school play, or you're doing something else. It should just be part of normal life. And so having that Inception style magical feeling is the kind of thing that, we feel like is a good combination of art and technology, where people go, that's cool. I want to use that. I want to create some cool stuff with it.
I think one of the things that is scary about AI is, first of all, nobody really, it's so complex that it's what is scary about the internet? It's infinitely complex thing. But I think that one of the things that's scary for AI, for creators specifically, is the idea of who is creating the idea and the actual story and things like that. I always sort of go to my analogy for this is, I have a 3-year-old, and I want my 3-year-old to watch stuff that's on Disney Plus, because I know that somebody signed off on this that I trust, right? That they are consuming a story that was created by someone that, I have verified in some form or format. Conversely, if he just watches YouTube, that just clicking around on random videos on YouTube, I have absolutely no idea, it's a video of a kid throwing cars into a pool. And I'm like, that's not something that I want my toddler to be, learning from or engaging with. I want that there to be a story. One of the things that when we first met, and I was excited to have you on the show, is this idea that you're giving the machine, quote unquote, a story that you've written or feel, or a scenario or experience that you feel needs to exist in the world, and it's helping you bring that idea, to in 3 dimensions. Which, if you tapped any writer on the back and said, "Hey, I can give you something that can help you, realize your world faster than ever before," that's so incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I mean, again, we want to support creative intent. To your point that everyone has access to a piece of paper and a pencil, but precious few of them will pick it up to draw or design a system with real intention. If you come to our system with real intention and a story to be told, we want to make it as easy as possible to visualize that story. And it is all about the anchor of your creative intent, the story around it. There's plenty of room for happy accidents and for generative AI to help you color outside the lines. But 85% of what Intangible is always your idea as a predicate, and never anyone else's. And then at the choice point of, okay, this looks fantastic. I have my story. I've got my shot composition. All feels great. It's well animated. The pacing is tight. And I choose to use a foundational model to render it. Up until that point, you have it. And if you choose to make that choice because you're comfortable with it, that's great. If you don't, then you won't. So we're trying to honor, again, the core creative activities that need to be driven by the human in the system, or a group of humans in the system, before you even get there.
I think every generation figures out a new way to create content. There was a TikTok generation, and, there was Insta before that. And so I'm curious to see what people will create.
I was Spirograph.
Yeah.
Meredith was making zines.
I'm also excited to see what kids create, right? For me, when you're a kid, you're unfettered by, it's not a job. It's just fun. And so I'm interested to see, what people go, I'm going to create a space station on the moon. I'm going to do, something else. And you start to get to see the full range of human imagination come to fore. I envision seeing that in writing. But I think it's going to be really cool to see visual examples of it because you're not trained to do any of that stuff until you get to school. But I think you'll see people earlier and earlier just being able to do stuff that they were not able to do before.
Yeah, I think we were all there for the desktop publishing revolution. And then right after it, the internet went visual, right? With the Super Mosaic browser. And then all of this stuff happened. There was this need to produce content for this emergent visual medium of the World Wide Web. Everyone adopted Adobe tools for that purpose. User experience discipline was created kind of out of that moment, everything up to present day, right? And we're in that massive tectonic shift moment kind of right now, which is super exciting because there's a ton of possibility.
To me, the idea of like 3D world building, for lack of a better term, in the B2B construct is like so exciting because 99% of the stuff we're doing is extremely boring. 99% of the stuff that we're doing is single person sitting in a chair, getting interviewed, talking about stuff, but not like really telling impactful, remarkable, memorable stories that sort of like stick with you for a long time. And like this, I know that this is not like a primary use case for you all yet, although, in a way it is. But I think that the B2B marketing community with tools like Intangible can start to really play with storytelling at a much higher level than historically they've been at.
I was going to say, I think it's hugely relevant on the B2B marketing side. I think you're right. There's a whole category of things like webinars and other stuff that already exist, right? And so the things I'm thinking about are what would be different? What's new and interesting? So first, we live in browsers and we live on the web. That means anyone can click on it and then you're directly into this thing. So whether that's you're an events agency and you met with a client in the morning responding to an RFP. Normally this would take, you've got to sign a thing. You got to go through the RFP process. Our thinking is, what if you could talk to them, come back and, within 10 minutes, create something, send this back to them and be like, hey, is this what you had in mind? And they click on it and it's not a bunch of images. It's something they're able to interact with. And they're able to go, yeah, but I want a logo to be here. And I think the crowds are going to come around this way. But they're engaging with your agency in a completely different way right now. Right. And you're competing with 10 other agencies, but this sets apart like how you interact with your client, maybe sets a different tone, a different standard for how you might be working with them. The same thing on a commercial shoot. Let's say you're, pitching Nike on a commercial shoot and they've had their big agency for a long time. You send them back the first draft of a great idea you have very, very quickly for basketball shoes. This is what we're doing. This is how someone would jump. This is what the court would look like. This is what it would feel like. Are you interested? And a big realization for us at least on the marketing side has been there are lots of pieces of content created in the world. There are even more orders of multiple more pitches created in the world. And so to the degree everyone's always pitching each other, it's, someone pitching the marketing organization or the marketing organization pitching their end customers. If we can be the thing that makes that process easy and it's lo-fi enough and it's something that, an intern could do very, very quickly, but it's still good enough that you wouldn't be ashamed of putting it in front of a client or someone else, that at least helps people earn business. And we want to make sure that, that process of people being able to communicate and thinking about 3D and 2D as communication mediums is something that's realized in as much as there's content there itself.
Yeah, it reminds me, to use the analogy earlier from building the house, it reminds me of like allowing every single person on your team, rather than having one person who's like a lumber specialist and one person who's like a painter and one person who does all these things. Like, oh no, we can build, a house like, super fast in 10 minutes or whatever. And then now the rest of your team is just thinking about the finishes and thinking about like, the hardwood or flooring, or like, what is the bathroom look like? And like, what if we had this type of mosaic or whatever it is? And that stuff is really impactful because I think for so much of like marketing teams, you think of events, I know that's another use case for y'all. You think of events, like so much of it is just getting like the blocking and tackling, the simple things to just get to the point of like, what is the booth going to be like? Where are the physical tables going to be? Where is, this thing, rather than the experiential piece and making it like fantastic. It's a great Airbnb-ism Brian Chesky came up with like the 11-star experience, where he does this whole thing where he goes sort of like, what is a 1-star experience at an Airbnb? Okay, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5-star. And then it's like, okay, well, what's a 6-star? And like, the end is like, okay, the 11-star experience is like, well, a private plane lands to get you, and Bruno Mars is there, and there's a concert and people waiting. And then it's like you back your way into the 5-star experience. You're like, well, I guess we could have like some of their favorite snacks sitting at the Airbnb, right? And that's kind of how I think about this. Like
Bruno Mars sponsored snacks, obviously.
Yeah, that's right. In the cookies in his face. In the shape of his face. But anyways, the reason why I say that is like, I think that for so long we've just been sort of like up to our neck in like the admin tasks and the building the house thing, and not thinking about the finishes. Whereas the finishes are the things that like are so memorable, right? And the things that people talk about and tell their friends about, and ultimately like that is the currency of marketing, right? Is word of mouth, is putting an idea in somebody's head that they didn't, think about 10 minutes before that.
100%. I think yours is a profile, honestly, that is kind of a key profile that we want to activate, right? Like we're clearly oriented towards people who are directly responsible for creative. But the more interesting business opportunity are for those professional creatives who do not drive Adobe tools, who maybe use Canva, right? And we want to afford them the same ability that Canva.
We use Canva. We love Canva.
Yeah. If you have taste and you understand your brand, Canva gives you all of the tools and just the right number of levers and knobs to dial in and get something which is you. And then to be able to redistribute that against, whatever form factors you need. Kind of the same thinking here, right? Like we will know that we've won, even though we're trying to do something incredible for the spaces that we know and the creatives within them. If you are choosing to use the tool and it becomes effective for you, and it becomes a way in which you can measurably convert business. And that's one of the KPIs that we talked about too. We'll know we're succeeding in that scenario around the pitch if you can increase your conversions of customers.
I think that's also a key orientation that sometimes people who start in tech don't have, which is, the tech is so cool and you want to talk about the tech and all the things that tech can do, but there's not a service orientation to some degree around like, well, what is this doing for the end customer? How easy is it for them? And I remember when Melanie came out with Canva, people didn't want to fund that company because they were like, well, all this other stuff already exists. And even just yesterday, I saw like this Twitter argument by people who were arguing about whether or not Canva is really a real tool for designers. And so I think breaking out of this creatives building tools for creatives bubble into the real world, and making things actually useful is also an orientation thing that I think as a tech business, we've got to start to break out of when it comes to doing visual generative AI tools. And I think a lot of Gen AI tools, I think it feels like they're meant for AI influencers. They're not meant for actual businesses trying to conduct business in the real world.
Well, yeah, it's two things there that I think are really important. The first thing is, and Charles, you nailed it. This should be the title of the episode. If you have taste and understand your brand, ... like, Intangible is going to be great for you. But I think that is like such a key part of this, that you need to train your teams, your marketing teams or creative teams or whatever, to be taste makers, which means that part of what your job is to be experiencing other great things. And like, that's the reason why, half of the, super famous filmmakers are out there that, made all these crazy films that we all love. They took their, inspiration from previous filmmakers. What's the name? Sorigawa. I'm going to butcher his name, but it was Seven Samurai or whatever. That like, was the basis for like 50 different filmmakers making all these other types of films. Anyways, all that to say, like, building yourself as a tastemaker and figuring that out is like really hard to do. But that is a job of a marketing team, of a CMO, of like understanding like, how do we teach our team to like learn what taste is and to have that. And that is like the huge problem. The other side of this is that is the huge problem with Gen AI, in my opinion, which is if you, this is going to sound a little mean, but it's like, if you think you have taste, and you're putting information into it, you're making a bunch of stuff that's really bad. And so what I've seen from people messing around with it that I would say sort of like maybe perhaps have not done enough work to sort of develop their own taste or to understand what other good stuff looks like or whatever it is, or maybe they just don't have it and maybe it's a net factor, I don't know, is it's just like, well, no, you use this tool to sort of just like make more bad stuff. But that's not what we're trying to do here. Is like, what you're trying to do is to, create great stuff. So whether or not you call yourself a designer or a writer or a creator or whatever it is that you call yourself, doesn't really matter. If someone on your team has taste and understands your brand and what you're trying to do, like now there are tools that can sort of feed into that. Whereas in the past, you would take that person who's a tastemaker and say, go spend the next 100 hours to go learn how to code in this specific tool, which might be obsolete in 6 years or a year, So anyways, yeah, we're next Wednesday, right? And like, that's the thing, right? That's why the Canva thing was so powerful, is because, we always talked about like citizen developers and people, doing all that thing and no code tools and all those sort of things. But it's like, once it, hits you in the face and you go, oh, I just made something really cool. And you have a designer who inherently has taste that can take that to the next level, then you're making the finishes of the house 5,000 times better than you used to.
Yeah. And I mean, you are a creative profession. You are a creative enterprise, right? We are in service of enabling creative enterprise. And so to the degree that we can make it possible for you to engage design at the right moment, or, put that first draft together so you can get a quick evaluation from your internal stakeholders or the clients themselves, that's what matters. The other thing, just to bolt it on from what we're trying to do standpoint, the other thing that's true is we need to make things repeatable. Right? Like, you want to be able to take a great artifact and use it again and again and again and again. And so our intention behind that design is exactly that, right? So you can take any artifact, just like, who here still goes to the template browser when putting together a presentation? Raise your hand. We don't, right? We riff on a pre-existing thing. And so the riffability is a very important thing around the tool.
Okay. So just quick overview on film, agencies, gaming, events. Obviously, events, super clear. Super clear need for all of these. All of these have 3-dimensional things. Obviously, you have people on your team that hail from very creative places like Pixar and otherwise. And EA, obviously, Bri, you spent a bunch of foundational time there. All of these use 3 dimensions. It's clear why everybody needs this stuff. And we talked a little bit about like how it just takes forever to do these things. Is it kind of that simple? Is like, it takes absolutely forever to make a new video game. It takes absolutely forever to create a film and tons of, money and all that sort of stuff. Is it just as simple as like, if those initial ideas are getting on the page much faster, that, we can be working on these, or is that too skin deep?
That is a core truth. I think both BV and I will have some good things to say here. So the thing that BV was alluding to, and I don't know if we stated it outright, BV, I might have been paying too much attention to myself in the camera, but what happens before you get into production 100% determines what you do in production. So starting from the earliest stages of, I've optioned a story, or I have this idea for a client in response to this RFP. Your ability to get that encoded in something which is digestible to them will determine the success of your business there, right? And if you're talking about film or game development, there are like 4 or 5 steps even before you get the green light to go into pre-production, which again is exactly where you nail down all of the core creative intent. And your job is to never get to a level of detail that doesn't bring everyone along for the journey, right? So an example in filmmaking it's still the case today. A storyboard is probably the most important artifact in the process after the script itself. Why? Because it is very low fidelity, but there is very high bandwidth in what it communicates. And so like I, as the cinematographer, the director, the set designer, the costume designer, the visual effects supervisor, whomever looks at a 2D sketch and understands exactly what it means for them kind of creatively. So that idea that you can work from very low or coarse levels of detail, but get to very high levels of detail over time in the way that the process requires is super important and is as enabling for those film creators or game creators as it will be for these other use cases we hope to activate around live event and architecture, urban design, and live event productions and theater and all of that good stuff.
And Ian, I think you described it really well, right? Is it as simple as making it easier so ideas can get out faster? I think at some level, yeah, that's it. If you can think it, AI is cool and all, but no one needs to learn another tool in their life. If you can make it easy to do something you were not able to do before, just fast, get it out there, make it look good, and do it better than, a TikTok video. So it feels like professional quality because we are talking about B2B marketing. It needs to be at a certain level of quality. That's the kind of thing that Intangible enables. It gets that first thought out there, but at the same level that, a good filmmaker might get it out there, or a good, someone who would shoot a good commercial in advertising would get it out there. But getting a first draft out quickly allows people to react to it, even within your team, with clients, other people look at it and they make the idea better. But now people are engaged around that project. And I think the core of all of that is it simple? Is it easy? Can I collaborate with people? And can I do that very, very, very quickly without it being super expensive? And those are all things that don't exist today.
Basically, it's like alignment and creative discourse and creative decision making is at the core. Yeah.
Yeah. And all those things on every these type of projects, 3D projects, which are so complex. And there's so much of that needs to happen is really exciting. The final sort of piece here before we sign off. I mean, to me, I just want more original ideas that were created by humans out there in the world. And for those creators to be able to, write and design and build those, faster. And that's really exciting to me because I've been in those shoes and I've been frustrated by, an inability to get certain things made the way that, I want to make them, and a lot of other people, out there. And I think that as we're all pushing more towards original ideas, that's what's so exciting, to be able to make an idea into something three-dimensional, again, feels impossible, for me as Ian, 5 years ago when I started Caspian, that's that's impossible. We would have to build out an entire studio. We'd have to build out, all these people to be able to do that. We'd have to learn these tools that are going to take, tons of time or, it just seems impossible. And so it's just exciting that y'all have developed and are developing another way to do this. It's not the way, right? It's this is just another way in which you can create, or you can do things the way that you used to do them, or, or find a new different way. And I think that's exciting for me.
Yeah. And I think it means big things for the industry as well, right? Like Netflix spends tons of money in inaugurating content. EA spends tons of money on content. I think one thing that's happened to those businesses, because budgets have gotten so big, everyone's super risk averse, so you get more lookalike content. And one reason you don't see great content, on channels like you used to or the box office is because, when your budget is that large, you can't afford to take a lot of creative risks. So one reason we started the company where we are is if we can make that beginning process easy, if it's easier for Netflix to review more pitches, if it's easier for them to get a better scent, maybe they start taking more diverse bets. Maybe they figure out this kind of content, that kind of thing. Let's take some bets on young directors. So Caspian can start to say, look, it would have taken us forever and lots of money to do a pilot with Netflix. But Netflix goes, hey, just send us your pitch in this format. And that takes, a couple of days for you guys to build. You're like, this is a great idea. It opens up a completely new business that previously would have been, oh, no, that's for a VFX studio and it needs writers and it needs all this other structure around it as table stakes to even pitch for that kind of business.
Well, I think it gives someone to give an idea, the concept in a minute. I mean, let's be real. We know how this stuff works, right? Like you send over a deck. I'm doing this right now. I'm doing this afternoon. You send over a deck with an idea, with visuals, and we have a script attached to it. And it's like, are they going to read 100 pages? Or they're going to check out the deck, and if they like it, then they're going to read the 100 pages, right? So it's like, if we can get the deck to be something that they can, instead of a deck, is something far more exciting, then you're going to have a way better chance for them to read the story that you wrote.
100% that's true. And for the creative community that we're intending to serve, just to speak to your point and from another area, like we're concerned. We love these people. We love what they're capable of. We are avid consumers of the beautiful storytelling that they're capable of. And we are adherent to the truth and beauty around a very well produced film or a game or a piece of architecture. That's what we want to see. And it means, like, again, putting generative AI in the terms of actual creatives who understand, how to tell these stories, but at the same time, not limiting access to anybody else. So we can have this nice moment of, just like Photoshop and the dawn of the World Wide Web, there was a tremendous amount of truly crappy graphic design that was done by people who shouldn't be doing graphic design. But a whole other community got activated in a way that they didn't even anticipate. And so we had all of these emergent creative kind of roles come out of that moment. That's what's the most exciting about this. We can reinvigorate creative industry, give people more creative at-bats, re-weaponize them. So if I'm a talented animator, but hey, I have an idea for a great game or a story and I can tell it now and communicate it now, that's what gets us out of bed.
Fantastic. Charles Bharat, wonderful having you on the show. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug, Bharat? Start with you.
Go to Intangible.ai and check it out.
Charles?
I wouldn't say anything different than that, but just know that we're listening. We've high conviction about what we're doing, but we need the community to tell us, hey, what would be even better for them? Because again, we're trying to serve them as well as we can.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Meredith.
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Vasan, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Vasan, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.